I told him, "You have to support my new job and take over my job as a mother." He smirked and did this. I've been warned that men cannot tolerate disrespect for a long time, but I refused to listen to the warning, and now my husband's revenge has sent me to therapy. I had the audacity to tell my husband he must take over my job as a mother. I don't know the reaction I was expecting, but things definitely didn't turn out as I'd expected. My husband did something that has left me so shaken that even my family is trying to realize what the hell just went down in my life. My name is Danielle, and I'm 31 years old. I'm married to Maxwell, a 32-year-old medical consultant. I didn't use our real names because I don't feel comfortable putting that part out. We live in North Carolina, and we've basically lived here all our lives. We have been together for 5 years and married for 4. So one might want to ask, what happened? How did we get to the point where he has hurt me beyond my own imagination? To be honest, I don't even have the answers to my own questions. I am beyond shocked that the man I had learned to label as my safe space could be the one that caused my biggest pain and anguish yet. It has not always been a sour marriage, and I can search in my life to back it. We married as lovers, and we had always had the best time together. Even after the birth of our son, our marriage wasn't all that bad, but there were signs of cracks. I joined Reddit just a few months ago, and I can't count how many people stated that their marriage suffered a huge loss after the birth of their children. I thought that would never be the case for Max and I at the beginning. You notice what I said at the beginning, right? That's because things changed drastically over the course of the past 1 year. Everything I bragged about in our marriage ended up being what seemed to make things worse. There have always been problems, just that it never had the chance to come out. But now it's here, and it's here to stay. From the very moment I got married, I was a housewife. I never had a problem with it because who likes working? The opportunity to be a stay-at-home wife didn't sound too bad for me. I'd like to make it clear that I have not always been jobless. I had a job that paid quite well before I tied the knot, but my wedding preparations made me lose my job. I spent so much time trying to get the perfect wedding that I neglected my duties at my work. As a result of that, I was fired even before the wedding came. After the wedding, it was hard to get another job, so I just decided to stop working entirely. Colin didn't have a problem with it, so it made things easier for me. I've always been dutiful when with my schedule. I made his food before he got back, even though I preferred to lazy around all day. No matter how much I laze around, I never forgot my duties as a wife. But after the birth of our son, it was difficult to continue being free, taking care of a child, and then being a wife. At first, I didn't notice that there was a problem. In fact, none of us did. There was a shift in my personal routine, but the shift wasn't in our marriage, so it was still bearable. After the birth of our son, I could see that Maxwell was going to be a great father. He never faltered in his duties as a father, and no matter how busy he got, he always delivered. Even though I'd like to give him his flowers as a good dad, I have to state that I do not see anything special in him doing job duties. I'm also a good mother to our son, and I do all my duties without negligence. From the point of birth, if we're to properly calculate, I'm certain that I spent more time with him than Max did. Why? Because I'm the one that stayed home with him when he was still too little to go to school. To be honest, it started to make my skin crawl when my parents wouldn't stop making a big fuss about Max being the best father in the world. They had always said it before, but at some point it just got too much for me. They never kissed an opportunity to tell me how he never faltered in his responsibilities. Trust me, if I'm complaining about how my parents made a big fuss about his dedication to fatherhood, I can't begin to explain how much his parents exaggerated it. They saw their son as the golden husband and father, and I was the lucky one who had to sit and wonder how many good deeds I might have done in my past life to have been blessed with such a good man. Oh, please. Even though I can't deny the fact that Max did his best, I deserve some accolades too. I'm the stay-at-home mother who tended to the child all those 10 hours my husband spent at work. And even after work, I was still the one taking care of my child. So it started to hurt me deeply at some point when I watched people disregard me and the party I played in my child's life. I don't care what anyone says, but I believe that I had every right to feel the way I felt. It's not easy to give your best, but then people just assume that you're doing nothing at all. So, I had my son 1 year after marriage, and my son turned 3 years old a few weeks ago. For the first year of being new parents, All the comments about how incredible Maxwell was never bothered me. But after the first year, I got a little tired of it. If you're wondering why it bothers me so much, then let me explain it. Maxwell works, and he has to leave the house to go to work 5 times in a week. He has very limited time to spend with our son. I agree that when Saturday and Sunday comes, he gives his best. But then I, on the other hand, spend 7 out of 7 days with our son. I give my all every single day. The only time my hours with him were reduced was when he started going to school. So can you see what I mean now? At some point, I started to feel like I was being made to look like the lucky one when my husband should be lucky too. I agree that I never lacked anything as a stay-at-home mother, but it's still unfair to assume that I wasn't doing anything of praise. I don't know if anyone is getting my ping here, but I'll go on. So, I'm not trying to say the basis of my marital crisis sprung from wanting to be appreciated more. It definitely played a huge part in things, but it wasn't the sole reason. So now, let me let you all know what the sole reason is now. I got tired of being a stay-at-home wife after my son resumed school. Yes, it got tiring for me. I was tired of constantly taking care of the house every single day all year, and then being made to feel like I was the lucky one. Before I had my son, being a housewife wasn't a problem because I didn't have that many responsibilities. I got to cater for only my husband and I. I cleaned up the house easily because it was just the 2 of us back then, and luckily, Max was a very organized person and barely messed up the house. In fact, he cleaned after himself all the time, and I barely had work to do. I mostly cooked, did the laundry, we have a washing machine by the way, and got groceries. After the birth of our son, I had to be responsible for a little human who wasn't old enough to clean up after himself just yet. So I had more to do than I had to do before. It got overwhelming, and I had little to no free time, so Max brought in a nanny. The nanny helped me for the first 1 year before he told me he no longer had plans to pay for a nanny. Now this is where the issues actually became significant. I just couldn't understand why he didn't want a nanny anymore. His reason was that having a nanny was getting too expensive and that we needed to save more money and think about the future. The nanny basically lived with us and had only the weekends off because at that point, Max was around to help me cater to the baby. As a result of this, the nanny was actually quite pricey, but Max had always taken care of the bills, no question asked. So it started to get frustrating when he made it known that he was tired of paying for the nanny. It actually got me riled up, and I couldn't understand why he felt like that was his decision to make. I mean, I'm the one taking care of the baby, and I'm the one who needed the help, so I didn't agree with his choice of letting the nanny go. Now, to be sincere, we did have an agreement before he got the nanny, but I just felt like things had changed, and he needed to change his mind. After the birth of our son, I didn't even think about getting a nanny. I was so overwhelmed with trying to balance everything that I forgot about that being a possibility. Before being a mother, and even before getting married, I judged women with nannies. I labeled them as lazy women who didn't have time to give their kids intensive care. I believed that it was possible to do it all on your own and that it wasn't hard at all. So after having my son, I slowly began to realize that motherhood wasn't easy. What was harder was being a first-time mother with zero experience about motherhood. Max was kind enough to notice that I was struggling, and so he decided to bring in a nanny. One day, he pulled me to the side and brought up the topic. I was glad that he was being supportive and that he even brought up the topic first. But before he hired a lawyer, he made it clear to me that he has certain conditions. I asked him what his conditions were, and first of all, he stated that after 1 year, he would stop paying for the nanny. He said he just wanted me to have a stress-free motherhood experience, and that's why he felt like I needed help for the first 1 year, since that was usually the hardest for first-time mothers. His second condition was that the nanny didn't bathe our son. I agreed to the conditions since I found them reasonable at that point in time. For me, his suggestion was a lifesaver, and I couldn't even see anything wrong in his conditions. So, when he approached me 1 year later, and it was easy to let the nanny go, I wasn't having it at all. I made it clear to him that there was no way I could cope at that point. I couldn't imagine going back to doing it all on my own without any help. I actually believed that Max was going to cave in to my demands when he noticed how serious I was, but I was absolutely wrong. He didn't act that way at all. In fact, I realized that he wasn't ready to accept my demands at all. The matter dragged on for a long time, and after minutes of deliberation, he decided to give me another condition. He told me that we could keep the nanny only if I was ready to start paying her. Yes, he actually said that to me, and I lost it the moment those words left his mouth. How could he expect me, a housewife, to pay for a nanny? I felt like that was a huge blow to my self-respect, because I knew he had to be aware that I was jobless and didn't earn money. The only money I had came from the monthly allowance he gave me. So I didn't understand why he would suggest that. It was clear to me that he was just trying to look for a way to shut me up, and he found the way. I absolutely refused to pay for a nanny, and I made my reasons known to him. I told him I couldn't afford a nanny, and do you know what he said? He said I could, and that all I had to do was take money out of my monthly allowance. Yes, my monthly allowance was enough to pay the nanny for 2 months, but I found his idea outrageous. I mean, how could he expect me to spend so much money on a nanny out of the little monthly allowance I have? He wanted me to take up responsibility for something that was supposed to be his, and it didn't make sense to me. When I argued that I wouldn't be able to do what he asked, he told me that he would also not be able to do what I asked. According to him, it wasn't easy paying for a nanny, my monthly allowance, our feeding, the rent, electricity, and everything else. He also told me he had to keep money aside since our son was supposed to start pre-kindergarten in a few months at that point. He told me he was thinking far, and as a result of that, it was impossible to keep the nanny. I hated his decision with every fiber in me, but I was broke, so there was nothing I could do about it. We let the nanny go eventually, and I had to resume my stressful life all over again. A few months after that, our son started pre-kindergarten, and I struggled with getting him ready for school and then picking him up. The fact that we didn't have a nanny around still hurt me, but like I said, I was broke, so I had to endure. When our son turned 2 years old, I decided to make a proposition. All I asked of Maxwell was that we get a nanny again, and this time, all we had to do was bring her in once in a while. Maxwell still refused because he felt like our son wasn't little anymore, and there wasn't a need for a nanny since he was attending school. That's when I actually started to get really riled up. What made matters worse was that I had to listen to both my parents and praise him for providing for the house and still bringing a present to my father. I just thought it was unfair for me to do so much housework alone without the help of a nanny, yet he was the one getting the accolades. It also riled me up that he felt he had the right to deny me a nanny when he knew nothing about what it was like to dedicate one's time to taking care of the family. We started having arguments about it, and it started getting really serious. I got suffocated with the work I had to do around the house and the amount of restricted free time I had. I couldn't even watch TV without thinking about going to pick up our son when it was time. Even with all these going on, I endured all the way to a few weeks ago, which was our son's 3rd birthday. I'm sure I won't be the only mother to state that a 3-year-old child is far from being calm, especially when you're raising a boy who's full of energy. It's not easy at all, and I felt like it was right to get a nanny at that point. Our son was running everywhere, touching everything, breaking things, and I had to make sure he didn't get hurt. I had no time for myself and my personal needs, so I got frustrated. I decided to meet up with Max one more time and bring up the topic of getting a nanny. Now, before any of you judge me, let's all remember the fact that I tried my best for 3 years. I did try my best, and I was patient. Over the course of those 3 years, I admit that my marriage did suffer, and there were a lot of ups and downs and arguments because of my desire to have a nanny, but I still feel like I was patient enough. But even though I felt like my actions were mature enough, Max apparently felt like I had been disrespecting him for too long, and I was disregarding his hard work as a provider of the house. When I brought up the topic of getting a nanny a few weeks ago, Max lost it quite literally. He refused once again and started stating reasons why I was making things difficult for him. He stated that he was going through hell at work each day, and then he had to come and endure my tantrums too. He told me he was fed up, and that I needed to stop asking him to get a nanny while he was busy struggling to make money and pay for the bills that kept piling up. He made it clear that he was not against me getting a nanny, as long as I took care of the bills. That statement got me angry, so I walked out of the house and visited a friend of mine. I told her I needed a job badly, and that I was ready to work, no matter what the job was. I was just too tired of being a housewife and wanted to get out of the house and live life a little. 2 days later, she called me and told me she had found a job for me. I was to work as a receptionist at a hotel. I had no problem with working at a hotel as long as I got paid. My friend knew someone there, so she made it clear that they could pull some ropes and get me hired no matter what. I was so excited that just 5 weeks ago, I decided to speak to Max about my new job. Sorry, Reddit, but this is where this update will stop. I'll update you all on everything together because I don't want to upload more than 2 updates. Please be patient because this is my real life, and I'm still trying to recover from everything. Update. Hey Reddit, 8 months later and I'm back. I didn't think it would take so long for an update, but I had to delete all social media and go to therapy. I'll continue from where I stopped now. The idea of me earning my own money and being independent made me so proud and full of myself that I didn't care to choose my words when I decided to speak to Maxwell about my new job. I just met up with him, told him I had a new job as a receptionist, and that I was supposed to resume in 2 days. He asked where I was supposed to work as a receptionist, and I said a hotel. That's where the drama began. He told me it was unacceptable for me, a married woman, to work at a hotel, and that he wasn't going to accept that. I was very angry when he said that because none of it made sense. I questioned him for not trusting me, and he told me he was only using his common sense. I got angry at his words because I felt like he was being biased. I made it clear that he was the one that wanted me to pay for the nanny, and now that I had a job that could earn me money, he was denying me the job, and it was unacceptable. He argued that he had no problem with me getting a job as long as the job was decent. He also argued that a receptionist spent a lot of hours at work, and I wouldn't have time for our child. He even offered to help me find a job that demanded less hours at work, but I refused. I told him that he had to support my new job whether he liked it or not, and that he would also have to take over my role as a mother because it would be difficult for me to work and take care of our child. I wanted both of us to do the job. Maxwell got so angry that he asked me to repeat what I said. I fearlessly repeated my words. You have to take over my job as a mother and support my new job whether you like it or not. Maxwell stared at me for a long time. Then he smirked and said these exact words. You want me to take on your responsibility as a mother? Will you provide for this house and pay the bills? You know what? I am done with your bratty attitude. That was all he said before walking out of the house. When he said those words, I didn't know how serious things were till he didn't come back home for over 2 or 3. I definitely resumed work at the hotel and didn't care that Maxwell warned me not to. About a week later, I got the shock of my life. Maxwell finally came back, but he came with divorce papers. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that he had already signed it. Not just that, he came with 2 guys who helped him pack my things out of the house. I was so lost that I couldn't do anything to stop what was going on. You might think that the divorce papers were the last blow, right? Oh no, it wasn't. Maxwell wanted full custody of our son, and he told me that. He also stopped giving me any monthly allowance and refused to let me back into the house. My parents thought they were dreaming. They couldn't believe that I messed up my marriage, but what's worse is that they realized Maxwell wasn't joking about getting custody of our son. Do you know that he had recorded me when I spoke to him about leaving my motherhood responsibilities to him? He recorded me and played it to me. I knew that evidence, plus the fact that he earned more than me and my job as a receptionist required more time than his own job would work against me. That broke me even before the custody battle began. I ran helter-skelter trying to get a better job, but it didn't work at all. I couldn't leave my job as a receptionist because it was the only way I was earning money. Just like I feared and predicted, his lawyer used the voice recording, my continuous desire for a nanny, the fact that I was a receptionist and spent too much time at work, the fact that I earned little compared to him, and then the fact that I depended on a nanny to function as a mother against me. I couldn't even defend myself, and just like that, I lost custody of my son. The past 8 months have been the most difficult months of my life. I have suffered so much that even therapy isn't working anymore. It's hard to accept that your own decision ruined your marriage and your life. I'm being made to look like I hate motherhood. It hurts me a lot, but there's nothing I can do. It's the helplessness that hurts more, and I hate the feeling of not being able to correct my mistakes.